So today we are going to move on to something new. We're going to be using inverse trig functions to find angle measures, but I want us to review a little bit first. So I have a warm-up here where I have the 3 different side lengths of a triangle, and I'm asking you what kind of triangle it is. And I've written them, and they're not necessarily in the right order, meaning they don't go from smallest to largest. So I need to figure out what they are. So 2 square roots of 5 is actually 4.5 about. Would you agree? And then the square root of 10, if we wanted to estimate, it's a little more than the square root of 9, which is 3, so a little bit more than 3, 3.2. So 2 square roots of 5 ends up being the largest side. So in other words, this is my C, okay? So when we're trying to figure out what kind of triangle it is, we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So in other words, 3 squared plus the square root of 10 squared, is it equal to, greater than, less than 2 square roots of 5 squared? Okay? Notice I put parentheses. Those parentheses are uber important. Okay? If you don't put them there, or if you put them in if you put the squared without the parentheses, the calculator only knows what you tell it to square. So when you use a parentheses, you're squaring everything. So when I look at 3 squared plus the square root of 10 squared, uh-oh, I forgot my parentheses. I just said it too, didn't I? So the square root of 10. Now notice what I have to do in order to close my parentheses. I have to use my right arrow, and then I get out of it, and it will square it. There's your parentheses, and then I square that. So there's your a squared and your b squared. Okay? And then how about c squared? So I need to plug that one in. Also parentheses, 2 square roots of 5. Got to get out of the square root, close, and square it. And what do you get here? 20. What kind of a triangle is it? It's obtuse. So here, I have that this is bigger, because I have that 20 is bigger than 19. And when the thing by itself, or when your c squared is bigger, that tells me it's obtuse. My smartboard's acting wonky over here in the right corner today, so I have to just deal with me. But any questions about that? Just a little bit of a review from 6B, right? We know how to do that. Wanted to make sure I emphasize the parentheses there. But let's talk about trig for a minute, okay? So this is not necessarily to write down, but since so many people did poorly on the trig quiz, I want to make sure, and especially if you're struggling with trig and you gave me your trig quiz and you're like, I don't know how to do any of this, you should really be paying attention right now. He's not even looking at me. This is for you, Abdul. Come on. All right, here we go. Ready? All right. So when I'm looking at this problem, how do I know I need to do trig? What tells me? I've got angles, which is degree measure, and what else is with it? Sides. So I have sides and angles combined, right? That tells me trig. So, ka, toa. So that's where I'm going to start. So I'm just going to write this down just as kind of like my little remembrance of what I need to do. So let's help a brother out. What do we do first? Label the sides. Only the sides that we need, right? So I'm going to label the x and the 18 only with my either adjacent, hypotenuse, or opposite, right? So let's start with the 18. Now, I don't have a right angle drawn in there. Shame on me. I should. Now let's see if my smartboard wouldn't let me do it during first period. Oh, it's a little better today. Okay, good. I recalibrated it 3 times. I've turned it off. I've restarted it. It's just acting really wonky today. It's better now than it was, though, so that's good news. So what's the 18? Opposite, hypotenuse, or adjacent? It is the hypotenuse. Excellent. So I'm going to label it as such. Good so far? All right. How about the x? It is the opposite because it's across from the 70. Do you agree? So that's my opposite. Okay? The side over here on the right would be the adjacent. It's touching angle 70, right? That's your adjacent side. But we don't need to label that. We only want to label what we need. So looking at my SOHCAHTOA, OH, which trig function is that? It's your sine. You okay, Hugo? You all right? Okay, I'm just looking a little sleepy on me. All right, so we know it's the sine. It's the sine of, right, we got to put our angle measure on the inside there, okay? So since we're given that angle measure of 70, that's what goes in there. And on the quiz that you guys took yesterday, that is just a number. Can't I just type it into my calculator and you get some decimal number, right? So, okay, that's a number, but what do I put on the right-hand side? O over H, which because it's so X over, beautiful, X over 18. I agree. So two things. One, are we okay with labeling the sides? Abdul? OH okay? Kind of, okay. Do we understand why it's sine? Hugo? OH. OH. That's why it's sine. Okay? Now, when you have this, sometimes the variable is in the numerator, and sometimes it's in the denominator, right? Here, it's in the numerator, which is the easier one. What do I do to solve? Yeah, I multiply by the denominator. In this case, it's just 18. When I multiply by 18, what happens to them on the right-hand side? That's what I wanted to happen. I want to get rid of the fraction, right? So I'm left with just x equals 18 sine 70. I can just plug that right into my calculator. Go ahead and do that. Do me a favor, though. The batteries are low on some of these calculators. We've ordered batteries. They're just not in yet. Unfortunately, that does mean that sometimes the calculator defaults to radians when it's got a low battery mode, okay? So just double check your mode every time. Just want to make sure that that happens, okay? So plug that into your calculator for me. All right, so I agree. You got 16.9. Okay. I think a good rule of thumb is 1 decimal place, okay? So let's just kind of keep that as what I'd like for you to round to, 1 decimal place. Are we good so far? Now, what were we trying to find here? We were trying to find which x was what? A side, wasn't it? Today, we're going to move it so that x is actually the angle instead, okay? So you're going to use trig when you have combination of angles and sides, and just regular old fancy trig like this when x is a side. What happens when x is an angle? That's what we're going to look at, okay? So what I mean is this. This picture here. So here's example 1. All right, so I want you to draw this picture for me. So again, I have a right triangle. I'm going to turn the lights down just so you guys can see what's happening. Is that better? Okay, good. So we're trying to find the measure of angle y. A little bit different, though, because we don't know what the degree measure is. So we're going to have to do something a little bit different, okay? And we'll look at what that's going to be. Angle y is here. I still have a couple of sides to label as my O, my H, or my A. So let's do that. How about the 100? Daisy is at the O, according to angle y, that's what we're trying to find, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. Good. It's across from the angle, so it's my opposite. Excellent. What about the 41? What do you think about that one, Hugo? Perfect. It's the adjacent. And since we know SOHCAHTOA, right, which trig function is that for me, Patrick? Perfect. So I'm going to use the tangent, okay? We know the side opposite, the side adjacent, and we're going to use the tangent. It's the tangent of what? Well, it's the tangent of my angle. Do I know what that is? So I'm going to put my variable there. Since it's angle y, I'm just going to call it y. Is that okay? So tangent of angle y equals And then what goes on the other side? Yeah, the O over H, so the 100 over the 41. The equation, the process of the equation is still the same. It's just where the variable is, right? So the variable's here. It's an angle measure. I'm just going to rewrite it. Tangent of y equals 100 over 41. When you have this and you're trying to find an angle measure, you're going to use something called the inverse function. So I want you to look on your calculator for me, and I want you to look for these buttons. Tell me if you find them. Do you see them on your calculator? They're right above them. They're like, if you hit the second button, like second sine or second cosine, second tangent, do you see that there? That little -1 is just some notation that says inverse trig, inverse sine, inverse cosine. Okay? And what we're going to do here is if we're solving for the angle measure, that's what we need to use. So y, the angle y, is simply just the inverse tangent of 100 over 41. So you're going to use these inverse functions when you're finding angle measures. If you're finding side measures, you're just going to use the regular trig function, okay? Idris, what'd you get? 86.6. Okay. Does that sound right? 86.6 degrees? Inverse. So second tangent. And then you just say 100 divided by 41 and close your parentheses. Did you get 86.6? Anybody else? Amaya, did you get that? You did it? All right, let's try it again. All right, so check your mode, Idris. Make sure that you're in the right mode. Okay, did you do inverse tangent of 100 divided by 41? Or did you close your parentheses? Let's try it. Inverse tangent, 100 divided by 41. All right, so I got 67.7. Yeah, okay, good. Now, what are my units here? Degrees. It's an angle, right? So it is a degree measure. Does an answer seem reasonable to you? Is 67, 68 degrees? If I look at the picture, what numbers would be reasonable? Just for angle y. Anything less than 90. Greater than 0, right? But it's got to be less than 90. So does our answer actually seem reasonable? Yeah. So we're good. How do we feel? Okay so far? It's just like the regular trig, it's just that you're using inverse. That's the only difference. Hugo. Shh, 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 shh. Uh-huh. Because you're trying to find the angle measure. When your variable is your angle measure, you use the inverse. Okay? All right, let's try another one. Here's example 2. Not 12. Example 2. Okay? Example 2. We're trying to find the measure of angle x to the nearest degree. So again, you're trying to find an angle, so that's a big clue to us that we're going to do inverse. You also, before you even get there, need to label the 13 and the 18 as either the opposite, the adjacent, or the hypotenuse. So if we're looking at angle x, 13 is the adjacent side. I agree. And then 18 is the hypotenuse. My smartboard's getting really wonky again. It gets hot and cold. I know. I'm not sure what's happening. I put a ticket in to try to get it fixed. We'll see. So AH. So katoa. Emily, which one? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Cosine. Good. So it's going to be the cosine of angle x is equal to 13 over 18. If you want to jump straight to the inverse, that's okay. So if you want to skip this step and just say, I know it's going to be the inverse, Miss Macker, can I just go straight to that? Perfect. I'm okay with that. All right? That's fine. But what I absolutely need to see is the second step. Okay? I want to see that you've done the inverse and that you're using cosine. Fair enough? Okay, Bradley, what'd you get for the angle measure? Does that angle measure make sense, or does it seem reasonable to you? Very reasonable. I agree. Good. How do we feel? Combinations of sides and angles, okay. All right, so what I'd like us to do is we're going to pause the recording here for a minute, and we're going to pair up. So I want you to pair up with somebody who has phone access. We're going to play a short 6-question Kahoot where we've combined sides and angles with a trig, okay? So go ahead and pair up with somebody. I'll pull it up for us.